Hi everyone, welcome to another Hattons Model Railways live stream. And this morning, I'm really pleased to be able to show you some of the close-ups and the new information we have on our forthcoming Genesis coaches. This is for the batch 2 models, so these will be released after the first batch is released towards the start of summer 2021. Whilst we are waiting colour samples for the initial range of our coaches coming into stock, we've been busy preparing the second batch of these vehicles and now have the full colour layouts for you able to review on our website. So today I've got some of these up close and personal so you can have a closer look at them. I'll be describing some of the details, some of the livery differences and changes, and where and how you can get them onto your layouts too. So I'll be covering quite a few different items that we have. If you have any questions regarding any of the liveries we're covering today, or you want to find out a little bit more, please do head over to the link in the description down there, where we've got a huge amount of information on our Genesis coaches. And every single thing you'll see today is available there for viewing afterwards too. So let's get stuck in, let's get started. And I'll just show you, just to remind you, some of the engineering prototypes we've recently had for these coaches. This is the 6-wheel third, and then, of course, the 4-wheel brake there too. So we've got a lot of details, and we are combining a lot of different liveries onto these coaches. So getting stuck in with the batch 2 colour schemes, we start first at the Great Central Railway. Now, this is the first of 3 major liveries carried by the GCR's coach fleet, and this is actually the first. This was introduced in 1897 when the company changed from being the Manchester, Sheffield and Lincolnshire Railway, changed over to the Great Central Railway once it had designs on expanding to London, which it did, of course, by 1899. A huge amount of 4- and 6-wheel coaches were inherited by the company from the ex-Manchester, Sheffield and Lincolnshire fleet, but they were painted in this distinct colour scheme that you see here, the French grey and brown colour scheme, which is quite different to what's operated by a lot of other companies. You'll find as well that the brown does finish quite lower on the panels than on most of the other liveries we are supplying. So this is coming through in a variety of vehicles. You've got 4- and 6-wheel coaches coming through. And these are great for some of the very early expresses in the late 1890s on the newly formed Great Central Railway, with different variations in first, third composites, as you can see here, and a full brake too. By the early 1900s, the Great Central Railway had started to pick up bogie coaches, such as the Barnum coaches, which were built a little later, and these were started to be painted in other liveries, finally ending up in the teak colour scheme. But these French grey and brown coaches did survive on through the 1900s, mainly coming on to lesser duties with smaller locomotives, but you could still find them out there into around the early 1910s on the GCR network. And of course, the coaches themselves lasted right through until around the 1920s and 1930s with the London North Eastern Railway. So getting a bit of a close-up there, you can see that we've fully prepared this with the gold leaf numbering and lettering, indicating the different classes in the beading there. The GCR's forward crest is also located twice on most of the coaches, I believe. We'll just head back to our 6-wheeler there. Yep, it's located twice on there as per the Great Central Railway's painting specs. And one little interesting addition, which isn't on too many of our Genesis coaches actually, but is present on this particular vehicle, is the white edge to the wheel rims there, what's known on more modern locomotives and rolling stock as white wall tyres. This will be on the wood-edged wheels, as you see there, and again, was part of the Great Central Railway specification for painting coaches, but does add a little bit of individuality to these vehicles too. Of course, if you're not a modeller of the GCR at the turn of the 20th century, a small number of the GCR's 4- and 6-wheel coaches are in preservation today. We researched one particular vehicle at the Vintage Carriage Trust at Heathley and Worth Valley Railway that was measured, designed, and a lot of the livery elements came from this particular vehicle too. Another vehicle has similarly been restored by the Great Central Railway at Ruddington, and a final vehicle is also in use at the Buckinghamshire Railway Centre. So 2 vehicles there on their original GCR territory, and all of those have been meticulously researched and that data combined to get the GCR livery for our coaches, as you see here. So we've got a variety of these available to pre-order now, crossing both 4- and 6-wheel coaches. As you can see on the screen, this particular livery coming up, the French grey and brown. And all these batch 2 liveries that we'll be looking at today will be available towards later in 2021. We don't have an exact date yet, but as soon as we do, we will be featuring it on our website and we'll be updating you guys too. So you can check out a full list of what liveries are coming through now on the website, both in batch 1, batch 2, and in further liveries too. We've had a request there for the Somerset and Dorset, and this is one of the most popular requests we've seen coming through. We are taking all ideas on board for these coaches, and we are open to suggestions too. We do intend to produce, shall I say, the Somerset and Dorset coaches in the future. But please do send your ideas to ideas@hattons.co.uk if there is a particular livery you would like to see on our coaches. Right, let's get back to batch 2. Let's head a little bit more north now. Let's head over to the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway. This is a colour scheme that's quite different to the Great Central colour scheme we've just seen. Officially, from the 1896 notes, it's known as Umber and Dark Lake, but it can be known by quite a few different liveries. It's also known by Burt Umber and Carmine Lake, also Orange and Tan too. Whatever the livery name, it's certainly this distinct colour scheme that we see here on these particular coaches. This was a very standardised livery brought in the mid-1890s by the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway's carriage superintendent at the time. And in very, very minor variations, it lasted right through until the amalgamation of the company with the London North Western Railway in 1922. So it's no doubt a very familiar livery for some of you out there. You'll see with the gold lining on there too, the class indications again, just below the distinctly red painted drop light windows. These are picked out in white, as you can see, with the gold leaf on the inside, as per the standard LYR lettering of the time. And again, this has been fully researched from vehicles that are preserved by the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway Trust up at Keighley. So again, we've looked at these and original photos for references on the colour schemes there too. So these are some to have a closer look at. If you're a modeller of the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway, these last over 20 years in service in this particular colour scheme. And of course, as we've just seen, there are several samples running in preservation too. You compare them with the likes of the Bachmann LYR Class 5, the radial tank locomotive, which would look fantastic paired in its passenger Lancashire and Yorkshire livery, which I believe is available at the moment. So again, just looking at some of the variations we've got there of these particular vehicles, we are covering again the 4- and 6-wheel variations of these particular coaches. The Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway did have a good balance of both of these sorts of vehicles, mainly using them on the smaller branches and on suburban duties, especially with the introduction of bogie rolling stock from the early 1900s again, which went onto the main express duties. Although certainly on summer Saturdays and in other high peak periods, especially in what's known as Wakes Week, where a huge amount of workers will be travelling to either Blackpool, Scarborough, or some of the other resorts served by the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway, you would find these coaches coming back out into use there too. So they really did have a long life with the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway, and that is something you can recreate right now on your layout. So again, if you'd like to find out a little bit more about the exact running numbers and vehicle variations we have available to pre-order now, do click that link in the description and you'll find out all you need to know. Sticking with the, shall we say, the becoming LMS companies theme, but heading back south again a little bit, we're now heading to the Midland Railway. Of course, we're all familiar with the Midland Railway's crimson livery, which had been around for quite a few years at this time and did form the basis of the London Midland Scottish Railway's livery too. So we have this particular variation that you can see here. I've picked our 4-wheel first coach. You can see that this has separate smoking and non-smoking compartments indicated in the window. And you can see also the post-1906 livery variations here too. So I'll just show you again another of the Midland vehicles. In fact, I'll bring up 4 for you. This is the 4-pack that we are producing, and you can pick up the vehicles singularly, and you can also pick them up as packs of 4, as you see here. And you can see again the variation in the 4- and 6-wheel fleet. Now, what I find unusual about this particular colour scheme, it really does set itself off against the other vehicles in the fleet. This again is the post-1906 colour scheme for the Midland Railway's coaching stock fleet. And this meant the main thing was the removal of the class indications from lettering just below the windows on the doors to numbers on the doors themselves, as you can see replicated here. Also, the Midland branding in one large band at the top of the coach. But also look at that black band across the top of the coach too. That goes right up to the rain strip on the coach. Rather than a totally grey roof, you have a partially grey roof and a partially black roof, which is pretty tricky to see on this 2D colour layout, but it will have a really pleasing effect in model form. I'll just give you a little close-up of that there so you can see just how that goes right up to the beading there too. The crimson is very similar to that of the London Midland Scottish Railway that you have there too. And you can see there the full lining on these coaches and just some further detail on the smoking signs and, of course, the Midland branding there too. I'll just take a second to answer some of the questions there in the chat. If you're having a look at some of the specifications there's quite a few questions regarding these specs. I'll show you the first EP very briefly to cover some of those. You've got the separately fitted, well, separately fitted everything really, a lot of etched separately fitted parts, many different toolings covering the different eras, covering the different types of lamps, several different types of coach covering the 4- and 6-wheel vehicles, lit coaches with some variations, full underframe detail too. If you do want to find out more about the variations and the detail that's going into these coaches though, either head over to our YouTube channel where we have a huge amount of video showing off the first samples, or of course click the link in the description where you can find out a lot of information there too. So we've gone through the Midland now, we've covered up these, and I think we are going right up to the most modern of these coaches we are replicating. This, of course, is the BR Crimson livery. Now, not many of these 4- and 6-wheel coaches remained in BR service at this time. A very small number could be found in Southwest Wales working on miners' trains. From the research we've done so far, we've seen that these are painted in a standard brown livery by the Great Western Railway and weren't changed whilst they were in service with the British Rail Company itself. If you do have any research there, we'd be interested to hear it. However, in the meantime, we've looked north for these particular coaches and found that a rake of them was in use on a branch line in Scotland on a suburban route running out of Edinburgh, known as the Balerno branch. These particular coaches are based on the vehicles that ran on this line. A small number of them were repainted into the standard BR Crimson livery of the time, but weren't provided with any lining. And as you can see here on the screen, not only were they kept the LMS number, shall we say, sorry, but they did have the BR, SC and M region indicators showing that it was a Scottish allocated coach, but had come from the London Midland Scottish Railway. So this is one of those particular vehicles painted into crimson, and a very small number of these did run in real life until around 1952, 1953 on that route. And again, a very small number of those ran in South Wales on miners' trains in a different livery. But it does give you some great opportunities to model some of the final services that these 4- and 6-wheel coaches operated. Although by this time, we can only really find evidence for 4-wheel coaches remaining in company operation, such as this. So we've produced brake thirds and thirds for these particular vehicles with several different running number variations, so you can make up either a small branch line rake or on some of those very last suburban services that you will find these vehicles on at that time. Going back to the colour layout again, you can see these have the most modern features of our Genesis coaches. They have the later lights and, of course, the vacuum brake cylinders that are required on there too. But we have got a huge amount of different variations on these particular coaches, so feel free to head over and have a look. We are producing these as a 4-pack again with the Scottish numbers, and we are also producing a full brake in the BR Crimson. This is a completely independent number set. This is indicating one of the more numerous, shall we say, full brake 6-wheel coaches that were inherited by the British Rail, shall I say, in the 1950s from the big 4 railway companies. You could find a lot more of these full brake vehicles still in service from the big 4 companies coming through, and we've done a replication of this similar vehicle here, fully repainted in the BR Crimson colour scheme that you can see on the screen there. That'll also look great with some of our engineering coaches, which are, of course, coming through in batch number 1. So, Kingory, we've got 2 more to cover yet from this particular batch. You've got those there, and all the rest have been mentioned in the chat so far too. So the final set of colour layouts I've got to show you today is the National Codeboard livery. Now, we couldn't resist this colour scheme, really, with the growing rate of industrial modelling out there, the huge amount of new locomotives coming through, including our own Andrew Barclay locomotives in this particular colour scheme. The temptation to model these trains was too strong, and the National Codeboard did have its own internal passenger services on a lot of the larger colliery sites, and of course the multi-colliery sites in places like the northeast of England. So they inherited a lot of coaches, bought them when they were withdrawn from the standard service on the mainline companies, and kept them going for quite a few years since. Some services lasting right through until the late 1960s at places like Backworth and Ashington collieries. So we've replicated vehicles that we've seen out there on different National Codeboard networks in the distinct blue colour scheme that we see here. Quite a few of the coaches were also painted in a crimson colour scheme, and we've seen 1 or 2 painted in a light green, sort of an apple green colour scheme too. But we've chosen to go with this distinctive National Codeboard blue, as it complements a lot of the locomotives and models that are out there currently. So again, we have these just in 6-wheel variation. There wasn't really many, if any, 4-wheelers serving their time by the time the National Codeboard came around. And these can complement some of the earlier bogie coaches that came into service with the National Codeboard at the time too. So if you want to model an industrial layout, but you still want to have passenger duties, this really is an exciting way you can include some of those on your layout. So again, we have the individual coaches either as using the third vehicles, of course, transporting workers only. They didn't have a class system on them, but we are using the third class vehicle toolings to replicate these particular models. So I think we've got a fan there. I think we've got a couple of fans there, actually. Flying Scott there mentioning that he thinks it's a handsome livery, and it really is something that's distinct compared to the other Genesis coaches that we are providing so far. And VC's 00 model railway there thinking it's a brilliant livery too. Whilst it is a little bit more plain, it certainly will stand out and be distinctive, whether you are picking up more Genesis coaches or you are wanting something else to appear on your layout. So there's 2 more liveries to quickly cover. The first, as we've mentioned in the chat there already, is the London South Western Railway colour scheme. We just haven't had a chance to get this finalised yet. We will be showing you something on that particular colour scheme very, very soon indeed. So stay tuned to our YouTube channel, or of course keep an eye on our Facebook page and website too. We'll be showing you the colour layouts for that particular livery very, very soon indeed. And the final livery, which was part of our Batch 2 release, is the Great Eastern Railways colour scheme, which for a number of reasons we are now shelving and putting back to our third batch. so it will come as part of that later batch in a future release. So at the moment, we're not going to be putting GER in the batch 2 liveries, but the liveries that we've seen here today and the London South Western colour scheme will be coming through as part of our batch 2. So I'll just give you a quick recap of those again. So we have the Great Central Railways 1897 onwards, French grey and brown. We have the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railways, Umber and Dark Lake, again used from the 1890s right through until 1922. Midland Railways post-1906 Crimson, used right through to the grouping in 1923. The BR Crimson livery coming in from around 1948 and in use on these particular coaches until around 1953, but in use on several coaches right through to the late 1950s, early 1960s. And finally, the National Codeboard livery there again, used from the formation of the company in 1947. Sorry, the board, should I say, National Codeboard, from 1947 onwards, right through in some cases to the 1960s. So these are the liveries that we're bringing through in batch 2. They're certainly not the only liveries we are bringing through on our Genesis coaches. We have a huge range as part of the first batch, which will be released before the liveries we've seen today, including the big 4 railway companies, other pre-grouping companies such as the South Eastern Chatham and London and North Western Railways, and there's even more to come in the future too. We haven't confirmed any specific liveries for future batches, batch 3 onwards yet, but we are always open to suggestion. We have a list on our website of liveries that we are looking at for this third batch, including the Somerset and Dorset, the Metropolitan Railways, 4-wheel vehicles there too, and we're always open to your ideas. If you want to either leave a comment on the video or send an email over to ideas@hattons.co.uk with your livery suggestions for our Genesis coaches. So the next thing you should see from these particular vehicles, hopefully very soon indeed, is the colour samples for our batch 1 coaches. We've of course shown the engineering prototypes that I've got in front of me here today, and you can see right here now on the screen in full detail. Very soon indeed, we'll have the fully liveried versions of these, and no doubt we'll be producing a video and, of course, putting all the news on our social media and website too as soon as we get those, so you can have a real closer look. So I hope you've enjoyed this preview. I hope you've learned a little bit more about some of the liveries we are producing. If you want to learn any more at all, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Either leave a comment on the video or get in touch with our customer experience team, who will be more than happy to help you out. And of course, we've got a huge amount of information on the Genesis coaches, showing some of the engineering samples and all those livery samples we've seen today in full high definition. If you want to click that link in the description, you can be there for hours and hours finding out more about these coaches. And it really is a worthwhile way to spend your Monday morning. Otherwise, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay tuned on the latest on these coaches, and of course more railway videos too, either real railway profiles or various other videos covering model railways there. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Facebook too, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.